What's cooking, everybody? Welcome to Season 1 of Xian Archive, my new podcast. It's your boy, Matt Xian, and in this season, we're going to be exploring psychedelics and creativity with musicians, visual artists, fellow podcasters, thinkers, philosophers, and beyond. I hope you dig it. We put a lot of work into this season. If you do enjoy the show, please consider leaving a comment, a review, a rating, and it would mean so much to me if you were to share these conversations with people who would benefit from hearing them. Thanks for being here. I hope you guys enjoy the show. Much love, and let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it.
Greetings. Accessing archive. Authorizing. Access granted. Accessing file.
Let the listeners know about your podcast. It's called Third Eye Drops. Really great podcast. Lots of awesome psychedelic researchers and participators and just kind of people that are thinkers of all sorts and styles. And I wanted to kind of get to know how you decided to make a podcast and make it about what your podcast is about, psychedelics, spirituality, philosophy, entheogenic experiences, and how did the story of Third Eye Drops begin?
Yeah, so I would agree with your assessment. It really is a kind of multidisciplinary wonder crew of creatives, scientists, what else? Academics, philosophers. And for me, I guess it was sort of the path of least resistance in terms of ways that I could verb my existential wriggles, because at some point, we all have these burning questions. We all have the same sort of demons floating around in our minds, and they take all kinds of different shapes. But I think at a certain point, you've got to find a way to verb them. You've got to find a way to turn them into something you can do. Otherwise, there's not very many options. One option is to pretend they don't exist, and that if you just keep going through the motions of your life, doing the things you're told to do, follow the well-defined path, that it will somehow magically go away. Or you go crazy. And I think for me, the idea of not expressing those clogged up wonder glands drove me fucking crazy, man. Like, I remember years ago when I first started podcasting, I was working at a school as like a special education aide, and I had just started podcasting, and I would go into the bathroom like at least hourly to check my social media or to post something or to, see how the podcast was going. And it just became this obsession to the point where it's all I was thinking about. and
Mm-hmm.
ways to interface with those ideas that were coming up on the podcast was all I was thinking about. And these were things that I sort of alluded to earlier, like I was already interested in, but I had no way to do them. I had no way to transmute them into something from out there into in there
Mm-hmm.
that I could then bounce back at other people. And as you know, that's the beginning of everything. That starts the dominoes of meeting other people who think like you, creating your own little creative community. And that's everything, man. Once you start that process, it's just like gifts, gifts constantly.
Yep.
Like, how many things have you and I done together over the years now? How many events have we been to? All
Mm-hmm.
because one day I was just like, shit, I have to figure out a way to do something with this desire, or it's just
Mm-hmm.
going to keep bubbling and gurgling inside of me until it becomes some sort of cancerous resentment about my life circumstances. And I think that that's a point that everybody gets to and can take on infinite forms in particular, but in the meta it's kind of the same. It
Mm-hmm.
just takes different forms. So I say it was the path of least resistance for me because I guess I should mention I was a musician as well. I played in bands, and that was another big outlet for me creatively to
Mm-hmm.
express some things. But in musical projects, especially bands with 4 or 5 people, sometimes it's not as direct of a path as you would like it to be to express some of those things, and there's competing visions, and you're
Mm-hmm.
constantly conditioning it and shaping it for what it needs to be to please the group, and that's great and that's beautiful and that's fine. But at a certain point, you have to get those things out somehow. And for me, I've always been a bit of a rambler, and I was really digesting a lot of podcasts at this point in time, and it just kept making more and more sense. I have
Mm-hmm.
microphones from music stuff. I get how to record things. I'm just gonna start doing it. Like, it just
Right.
made some amount of sense. Um,
Absolutely.
and then other
Absolutely.
things were a huge battle. How do you get an audience? How do you get people to give a shit? How do you convince yourself that you have the authority to get behind a microphone and start saying things to whoever will listen? Those are the other battles that are part and parcel with
Right.
with that kind of a decision.
Absolutely. No, I totally resonate with that. And I think that's why I began speaking as well. And it's funny that you talk about the work thing, because for me, when music was my first and foremost
Hmm.
project, where with my band Something Fiction, I just remember I used to push carts at HEB, which is a local grocery chain here, and I would just listen to my music, listen to my latest mix of a song I was working on, or an album, or an EP, and be at work, because they would allow you to listen to one earbud in your ear, not two, because that's dangerous. But you were able to listen to one while you were stocking or pushing carts, or just like not really customer interfacing. And I would use that time as my creative time. So I would be listening to mixes, and um, it's kind of funny because I would literally listen to the same song for like 2 hours in a row, which it kind of could be a bad thing for your mix, because you maybe overanalyze quite a lot. Now that in retrospect, I'm looking back. But at the same time, it was the most exciting thing for me, because back then, when you're first creating songs, like, you're
Hmm.
so impassioned with like the fact that you made something, and you're so excited with your progress. So I totally relate to the creative flow and entrepreneurship spawning out of like a day job, and
Hmm.
it kind of being a little bit of your piece in like the moments in between, being able to check back in on your podcast, and balancing that with the actual work that you're doing, to get paid, and to get by, and to make ends meet, and so on and so forth. And how I began as well, similarly with you, feeling kind of bottled up and needing to express all these philosophies that are just appearing to you. Same thing here. I'm a psychedelic explorer. I always have been. Even since a kid, I was very interested in the altered state space. And I didn't know that it was an altered state space. I didn't know that psychedelics did what they do. But all I know is at age like 13, I was already, Alex Gray was my favorite artist.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's so weird because I didn't know where he was drawing from or painting from or creating from. I just knew I loved that. And later to find out, I can experience that. So I would be having my first, few psychedelic experiences and trying to tell people who have no reference point. And I would just get a wall. I would just get like, maybe you should not do that. And maybe you should, that doesn't sound real. It sounds like you're living in a fantasy, so on and so forth. So my first few podcasts were melding minds with people that understood where I was coming from. I needed to get it out. I needed to express the visions, the revelations, the spiritual epiphanies that were just like coming to me without even me putting much effort into it. And that's how my first few podcast projects started. Those are kind of all in the past at this point. And I'm starting fresh, starting anew with this new podcast that I'm doing. Thank you for being one of the first guests. And it's cool to get to explore similar things that you explore on your podcast, with you. And so like, what has been kind of the most interesting philosophies that have come out of your guests and the conversations that spawn in Third Eye Drops?
Yeah, there are a few themes that definitely come up over and over again, but one of the things that came to mind, I wanted to ride on that you just said, it is this notion that we sort of on a deeper level know before we know what it's called. What you were alluding to with, being interested in altered states and kind of being mesmerized by Alex Gray's art. I think there's a part, I was going to say of everyone, but I'm really reassessing that idea lately. Famous philosopher Nietzsche, in probably his most famous work, Thus Spoke Zarathustra, explores this idea that the masses don't really want to be, I don't know what word to use, like, but I'll just, for the sake of ease and laziness, say enlightened. Like they don't want to know the truth. They don't want to interface with the harsh realities that come along with deeper exploration. Like there are many of, like, especially if we're talking about psychedelics, not an easy time. It's not like, as much as it gets painted, literally by people like Alex Gray, or figuratively by people who are interested in the space as, something beautiful, something majestic, something mysterious, and ultimately wonderful. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's horrible and terrifying and confusing. And, there are some people who even have fucking schizophrenic breaks or different kinds of, mental issues that spawn off of it. As much of a psychedelic apologist as I am, and as someone who deeply believes in the efficacy of them for medicine, for personal exploration, for spiritual context, all of these things, I believe that. But the idea that they can't also introduce some demons, some barriers, some delusions of grandeur, that's ignoring the other end of the sword. It's a double-edged sword, just like everything. And I think that in part is why this ends up being the domain of the few. It ends up being the domain of the really restless, of the people who from a young age have known, this isn't right. Like the stuff that I'm supposed to be doing, the school I'm going to, the jobs people are asking me to get, it just does not compute. It hits my soul with a thud. It gives me a gross, creeping feeling on the inside that is provoking the question of, is this really it? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And when you have that kind of gnaw on your soul from an early age, I feel like what comes along with that kind of questioning is a sort of closer this predisposition to sort of look at reality with a little bit more of a microscope. And
Yeah.
you start to realize that you start I remember from a young age questioning, why, like, choose whatever, a table. Why is that like that? Just having these weird thoughts that now, in the context of everyday life, it's so easy to never question why things are the way they are. Well, that's just how they are. I don't know, move on. But I
Mhm.
remember just having that kind of a mind of curiosity, probably to a fault, probably to a point where I wasted tons of time just wondering, like, why is this like this? Why do people do this? Why
Mhm.
does this make people happy? Why are people part of this religion? Why are people, always thinking this way, and then realizing, I think from a young age on some level, similarly to you, that everything was not nearly as solid as I thought it was. It wasn't like this unquestionable, concrete reality where
Mhm.
everything makes sense. I sensed holes. I sensed that there were things that people didn't understand and were just taken for granted. And I didn't have the language to express that at a young age, but I felt it deeper down.
Yeah.
And to try to bring it full circle back to your question about what some of the philosophies are that I am compelled to explore in Third Eye Drops, I mean, that's definitely one of them. And I think that also has a whole cascade of really important questions attached to it. If reality is not nearly as well defined as we think it is, what does that mean? What do we do with that? How do we make sense of it if we feel like it doesn't make sense? That's probably one of the deepest ones. How do we make sense of this, our obligations, our lives, our goals, if the traditional answers don't satisfy us? How do we do that?
Mhm.
Can we do that? And I think that is, if I had to try to wrap it all up in one overarching motif, I think that would be it, or close to it.
Right. Right. No, I resonate with that definitely. And it's funny because, the first few kind of awakenings you have, or Kundalini arousals, or just like deep insights, whether they came from psychedelics or meditation or some type of altered state experience, um, I would always kind of get the glimpse that, why were we not taught anything about this growing up? And why do ancient cultures, let's say like Amazonian tribes and communities that are more integrated with the past and stuff, they seem to inform people or the young people about, these planes of reality. Here in America, we don't. If anything, we think if people are thinking on this level that something's off with them. Um, for me, again, with like the infatuation with the art of Alex Gray and artists similar to him, it was speaking to something deep within me, deep into my
Mhm.
soul. And I didn't exactly know why or what, but it's funny because, like, I'm not much of a scholarly, academic type person. I'm much more of a creative um, than like someone who really took school super seriously. Just being honest, I didn't have the best grades in class. I got by, of course. Of you don't want to get in trouble with your parents,
Mhm.
but
Right.
um, most of the time in class, instead of listening to the teacher, I was trying to draw Alex Gray things. Like, I remember this. It's funny because when I look back, from time to time, I'll look back at some of my old school stuff, and I'll just see the kind of like the third eye that Alex Gray famously made popular with the band Tool, and a number of shirts and stuff. And I just have it all over all my work and all my notes and all my folders and binders. And it's almost like I was drawing the symbol and attracting,
Mhm. Mhm.
that future pull to that awakening, to like having a third eye experience, not even knowing it was a third eye. I just thought it was a cool looking eye.
Yeah.
um, but like certain cultures throughout time have been very informative about the deeper planes of reality and some aren't. And, I guess the kind of general consensus is that it's not productive, and we want, as America, to make society as productive as possible, to be a business person, to be someone who has this type of job that the government approves of, instead of to be a philosopher or a thinker or spiritual healer or an artist, where I think they should really,
Oh yeah. And
in the future.
isn't it so funny that once you get there, once you get to a title like that everybody respects, in that you're a professional
Mhm.
artist in the traditional sense, like you can sell your paintings for tens of thousands of dollars, let's say, or you're a
Mhm.
philosopher that has a book that's sold really well, then they love you.
Yeah.
But if you're at any of the in between stages of grinding, man, that's what a thankless place.
Yep.
You can just see it in social media. You can see it in any arena of public attention, where if I share a meme or an eye catching image or something, gobbled up, right? Just
Mhm.
gobbled 5, 10 times the engagement of if I share a podcast link or something.
Sure, sure.
But in those,
Yep.
but it's that's I think that's the illusion of sort of social currency, though, because what would mean more to you, 10 people sitting down and like vibing super hard with this hour-long conversation you and I are having, and really getting to know what makes you tick,
Mhm.
or getting 100 likes on a meme. It's
Mhm.
funny because at the end of the day, some people might think that social currency is all that matters, but I think you and I have
Mhm.
a sense that there's something more and deeper that needs, like, a vacuum that cannot be filled by the former, a vacuum that
Yeah.
cannot be filled by that shallow type of transmission. Don't get me wrong, man, I love memes, but we're in this strange monolithic paradigm of
Mhm.
chasing whatever the currency is. It's only as good as how many dollars it generated, or it's only as good as how many likes it generated. And clearly in that sort of a scenario, something's missing. Something's missing that um, we don't know how to articulate or to compensate for. And I think sometimes that can deter people from doing what they really need to do, because they have to chase.
The approval of others, maybe.
Yeah, right. The approval of others, definitely, and also how that legitimizes them.
Mhm.
That's what I was looking for, a word to encompass that idea, that they feel like
Oh,
they
100%.
need to be legitimized before they're able to speak in this deeper way, or transmit content in a deeper way. And man, is that fucked up. But
Yeah.
I kind of interrupted you before, so please
No,
continue.
no, absolutely. No, I love that thread, actually. And I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine about this, how people who want to do something, like say they want to make a song or they want to make a book, they'll do like the most bite-sized version of that, put it out, and because they don't have a fan base yet,
Hmm.
no one really gobbles it up, and then they feel like, oh well, I shouldn't do it because it's not a good idea. And it's like, make the book. Don't keep trial testing it to an audience you haven't amassed yet because you don't have a product yet. It's
Hmm.
so backwards. Social media makes things backwards because people see, maybe their friends posting things, getting a lot of love, a lot of comments, whatever. They want to do the same thing. They want a podcast too. They want a book too. They want to be a musician as well. And so they'll do, like, again, like a bite size, like, I'll put it out. Oh man, it didn't really get nearly as much love as my friends. I must not be good.
Right, dude.
And so they don't want to do it anymore. And then instead, they'll just fish on social media all day for things that work instead of follow their heart, right? And again, the way I think of content and podcasts and music is I really try and put myself back when I was young and first exploring this space. And I would have been so grateful to find conversations in line with the way I was feeling, the first
Hmm.
psychedelic
Hmm.
experience I had, the first spiritual awakening I had. Um, I have to think about those future kids that
Yeah.
might be in that need, who might need that album to carry them through a certain emotional place, who might need that conversation and help them feel assured. A meme can exist, but it doesn't really hit home. It'll give you a laugh for like 4 seconds, and then it's kind of gone to the wind. A good podcast, a good album, you think back to it over and over and over and over, and it's like this part of your consciousness at that point that you've learned something from and you can call back to in future conversations. And with memes, it just doesn't work that way. It's such a very sporadic, funny, but now it's gone. It's like a joke instead of like a thoughtful experience.
Yeah, it's like I couldn't tell you where I saw the last meme that made me laugh, but if I listen to a podcast with somebody that touches my soul, it's like I just had idea sex with that person. It's like I just let some kind of very intimate transmission into my mind, into my head, through my ears, down through my body, and then contextualizing all of that in who I am now. And that doesn't happen with a shallow interaction like a meme. Again, love memes, find them to be an extremely fascinating phenomenon, actually, but it's not the same. And as long as we're thinking it's the same, I think we're really sabotaging ourselves, and we're really depriving the world of great art potentially, because it is a way to deter people from going deeper, from exploring what it is they really want to do, because it's easier to do the low-hanging fruit pandering thing and put that out there. And if I could tell people one thing, this is funny because this is going to be like one part Gary V, one part Ram Dass or something, but it would be, don't fucking wait, do it right now. But the second part of it is, don't do it with any expectation of an outcome. Do it 100 plan. I mean, have a strategy by all means. But if you are focused on the end result outcome, you have corrupted the credibility, the authenticity of what you've done. And not only that, you've set a trap for yourself in your mind. You've set this sort of perpetually, it's the same kind of logic behind an economy that never stops. The infinite growth paradigm economy that the United States is in, this idea that every quarter earnings better fucking go up, or people are getting fired, people are, we're getting a new CEO, whatever. And clearly that's directly linked to pollution running amok, just a global illness that is focused on material rather than substance. And if your own creativity goes down that path, you're sabotaging yourself, your work, your mental health, all of those things. Instead, I try not to preach or pretend like I have any of the answers, but the only thing that has made any sense to me is to do the thing for the love of the experience of doing it, not for the outcome. Because if you can really put your soul behind whatever your particular emanation is, it's going to attract the people it needs to attract. I really believe that, man. I really believe that. It's worked for me. Dude, you reached out to me at a time in my life where I was probably working at that job and I had almost no social media followers. And you just saying, hey, man, really dig this podcast you did with Android Jones. Would love to distribute it. And man, in my mind, I was stupidly doing the thing that I'm warning against right now, where I thought to myself, that's it. I got this distribution now. Oh, shit. I'm going to, whatever. And so one, thank you, because it was very valuable, and it helped me in my own mind come to some sort of realization that other people out there dig this. But B, also, I fell into the same trap I'm warning against. So that's the only reason I have for saying what I'm saying, preaching what I'm preaching, because I've been there. And when you hit a spot like that, it's a perfect moment to take stock of, just sticking to it, sticking to what you're doing, why you're doing it, and then all the other pieces will continuously fall into place. But my other point is that there's not, you think there's going to be that one moment, but that one moment is kind of masquerading as something that you can't anticipate. And
Mm-hmm.
it could be a helpful thing, but it's probably not going to be the thing you think it is. So at some point, you got to fall in love with what you're doing. You've got to view it as a continuous journey, a continuous exploration with a disposition where this is fun. This is an
Right.
adventure. I'm exploring. I want to look over here now, and then I want to look over there, and then I want to look over there, and with no expectation of a treasure chest ever popping out. I really think that's the ticket, man.
100%. Yeah. It's been an honor to work with you. Love your content, love your voice, love your philosophies. It's great. It's awesome. Super privileged to have it, on Time Wheel, and to have this partnership and to just be friends with you. And I look forward to the future events, future conversations, everything to come. So yes, absolutely. And on the other points, exactly. I agree. Everything is kind of the way me and my brother think of this, because we both are building companies. Each move you make is one brick,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and you just like put this brick, and then you put this brick, and then you put this brick, and like over 5 years of brick building, you've got a pretty big ass thing going on, right? But there isn't going to be this like one big, like someone's going to give you a castle, right? So I think for people to put their first album out and to expect to get a record deal and get $1 million for their next album and to get to quit their job and all this stuff, it's just not the way it works. I think it's a little bit of a fantasy, and people paint that in the media industry to be the way it happens, because it's very fascinating. It's got a tail to it. It's got, when you hear about this new rapper blowing up, or
Mm-hmm.
you can't give up if it doesn't happen. You have to build those bricks, solidify the foundation, slowly but surely raise your home. And then there's that whole concept of 1,000 true fans. I truly believe in
Yeah.
that. And if it's not about 500,000, it's not about 1 million. If you just get 1,000 true fans, people who back you, if you drop something, if you have a product, if you have an event, if you have a new release of any sort, and you have 1,000 people showing up, that ideally is enough to further your
Mm-hmm.
career, in that you don't have to kind of maybe work outside of doing what it is that you want to do. Um,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and that's, I think, success. Success isn't, um, like this thing you get and once and for all you have it. You
That's
always
right.
have to keep going. Success is it's a sustainable state of being. And once you get it, you kind of understand how it works. And what we're talking about is that it's that you just keep going. And most importantly, people don't pay enough attention to this, I think, is self-fulfillment. That's the real currency of life.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
money's great. You can get paid for a podcast through sponsorship. You get paid for an album through people buying your album, so on and so forth. But you feeling good is the best thing that can happen to you. So if it takes making a podcast for you to feel excitement and to feel accomplished that day, or if it takes a new song, like sketching out a new part of a song, a new riff, that is what you should be doing, not just solely kind of, focused on the monetary gains that can bring. Fulfillment is the ultimate currency.
That is it, man. That is it. And there are many philosophers who have said similar things in much more long-winded language, but I think that is the essence of it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a professor I've been pretty obsessed with lately named John Vervacky, and I think I sent you his Awakening from the Meaning Crisis
Yes.
series. And
Super awesome.
yeah, he's brilliant, and essentially what he does is, point out what so many of us have either intuitively felt or realized, or we've actually seen the statistics about how clearly there is this deep chasm of meaning in the world right now. We don't have a way to define ourselves. Many of us don't have a religion that we feel like we belong to, have an ethos that we are living in the light of. And when you don't have these things, you're not living a very inspired life. And his series is very long, very in-depth. I mean, it's like taking a college class pretty much. There's 30, 40 something episodes of hour-long lectures in which he covers, a multitude of scientists and thinkers and psychologists from ancient Greece to and China. I mean, Lao Tzu, and just so many different thinkers. But one of the things that it really boils down to, I highly encourage everybody to at least watch the first episode, but he discusses this idea of creating kind of a feedback loop in your life where you're finding where you have a mythological sort of underpinning in terms of you understand your context, what you are, who you are, because you've defined it. You've literally defined it. And then you do actions to celebrate that thing in the spirit of that thing. And then each one of those is like a success. And you've now created a narrative journey because you've said who you are, you've said what you do to further this vision of who you are. And then everything you do now is like a success. Everything you do is in the spirit of this larger ethos. And when you can get in that kind of a feedback loop, you're it's like every time you do that thing, you're winning over and over again. You're deepening your relationship with that version of yourself you want to be. And there's a lot of interesting pieces of nomenclature in there that are fun, but I won't bore people with that. But that's the essence of it. I highly recommend that episode 1 of Awakening from the Meaning Crisis, at least. If you're like me, you'll go on a binge.
Right. Totally. Yeah. No, I think finding meaning in your life is the big hero's journey, It's because follow your excitement. That's the biggest kind of like, but also what's funny is follow your fear, because excitement is great. It's the reward, but a lot of times we're afraid to do the things we need to do most.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Yeah, and then there's that whole term, the way out is through. So not only will you get over the hump and see that it can be done, but you will get excitement that you did it, and it will create that feedback loop of meaning for you,
Yeah, I look at that phenomenon as a sort of obtuse emanation coming from the subconscious somewhere. Like there is this, when we were younger, it was this general sense of what's going on here? Like I just this doesn't quite feel right. What everybody's preoccupied with just doesn't quite feel right. And that's why I say this obtuse, just I don't know what it is, but it's something. And then as you get older and you gain more context, that feeling starts to become an opportunity. And that opportunity is going to appear to you as something scary. Exactly what you're pointing out. This idea that, oh, that'd be really cool, but this, but that, but I can't, but that, you just constantly putting up this own protective force field of shielding yourself from failure, right? When ironically, the deepest failure is never attempting. I mean, I think if there's anybody out there who would rather not go down in a blaze of defiant glory trying, I mean, come on, give me that's how you want to live, is just like cowering in the corner, being a good little boy or girl going through the motions. Give me a fucking break. Nobody wants to be that person, So, but we just have so much trouble implementing that in our own lives. We have so much. I'm guilty of it. I procrastinate, and I've deeply looked at where that procrastination is coming from. And this isn't true all the time, but some of the time at least, I really believe that it is that exact kind of protective mechanism that I just mentioned. This idea that there's some part of you deep down that's afraid. afraid of this shedding that would need to happen for you to really become that thing.
Right.
Because I even think too that the fear of failure is actually second to the fear of success. Because if you really became that thing, whoa, you'd have to go through some crazy shit. You'd have to go through the whole, archetypal hero's journey. You'd have to go to the abyss. You'd have to, die and be symbolically resurrected. You'd have to go through all of these things that, again, we don't even know what they mean on a practical level until we're there, until we're in that moment. Like right now, we're in a meta one of those.
Right.
We're in a meta crisis, a meta threshold guardian is what I would call it, or kind of maybe for some people an abyss. An actual moment of, this is the worst moment of my life. I'm deeply sick, or I'm have no money, or my loved one just died. But at a minimum, all of us are like at this threshold where we don't know what's going on. And one of the things that I've learned from making things and being something of a psychonaut is that sometimes, actually, I'm going to upgrade sometimes to pretty much always, you have to decide what these moments mean. And if you don't decide, they're never going to mean anything really impactful to you. And this is like, and the reason I say that I learned this from psychedelics is intention, right? Anytime, especially you're doing anything guided, like with a shaman or any kind of facilitator, intention. They want to know. And sometimes it seems like, oh, I just want to do this. I just want to do that. And when you're early on, I think it's easy to sort of gloss over the intention part because you just want to have some kind of experience. And you can have a great experience that shakes you out of your kind of beige hypnosis of everyday life, and you get reinvigorated and, wow, I really needed that. I really need to just come in touch with the mysterium tremendum and the mystery and all of these things. But when you really have an intention and that intention is met by the experience, holy fucking shit, is that an epiphany? That is that is like the mystery school of old. That's the death and the resurrection. And this might sound weird to some people, but if you've had the experience, you know what I'm talking about. And that's my invitation, is that every time you come up against a barrier, a hurdle, something difficult in your life, ascribe meaning to it. Like don't pretend that I'm just I'm making up a reason. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is decide a reason, decide what it means, and then that will bring more meaning into your life. I guarantee it.
100%. No, I agree. Yeah, that intention, especially in psychedelic experiences. And I do think psychedelic experiences have the potential to give you a reborn state. I don't think that state lasts forever, but
Right.
certainly you don't return to the same exact state, because at least now you have a reference point. Since I was in that kind of state to receive, I got such a powerful experience, and it started me on this kind of breadcrumb trail to see what it is I could actually find through respectful use of medicinal plants. And I did with psilocybin mushrooms. And I was able to see, through my intention of wanting to discover my deeper self and my higher self. And I discovered that what I love is music, more than anything, and art. Again, the psychedelic experience also shows you the movie of life, the fact that you are a director of your life. You have a say as to which way it goes. Now, we can get into how much of a say, because that's a really interesting conversation, but you certainly have a say. And I was able to kind of psychedelically see myself as, the main character of my play, and the world is the stage. And I know that can lend to a host of grandeur and all this and that, but at the same time, it could totally help you, if you're able to do this humbly, align yourself with your true mission.
Yeah.
How does that resonate for you and your psychedelic experiences that kind of gave you like more of an awakening or a type of direction towards where you wanted to go?
Yeah, I'm very drawn to this idea of Leela, the divine play.
Mm-hmm.
That there is just this massive universe-wide divine drama happening all the way down from the level of single-celled organisms to larger consciousnesses that we have no, awareness of or tools to measure. And I think that is, like I said, a very compelling, very attractive idea to me. I love, like, Alan Watts has some beautiful lectures and riffs on the idea. And also, man, I think your fascination with music is a beautiful one, and in many ways, that I think there's nothing closer to the true state of things than music. The fact that it's this journey. There's ups, there's downs, there's major keys, there's minor keys. There's
Mm-hmm.
that is what's going on biologically, emotionally, probably spiritually, on so many levels that we will never ever ever be able to scratch the surface of understanding or feeling. And I'm also very drawn to the idea that, and again, Watts talks about this in one of my favorite talks slash videos ever. If you look up Alan Watts dream or dream of life,
Mm-hmm.
he speaks about this. And actually, Beretta, who is 1/3 of the Glitch Mob, has a side project called Superposition, where he worked with the Alan Watts Foundation and got permission to use that
Oh, wow.
dream talk to make an ambient piece too. And I highly recommend everybody looks that up on Spotify or
Amazing.
wherever. But
Is that different than the Be Here Now?
it's
Didn't he do something with
he
Ram
did,
Dass?
yeah, he did one with Ram Dass as well. And
Okay,
it's the same, it's like the same project, just a different track
gotcha.
basically.
Very cool. No, I
Yeah,
gotta hear
yeah.
that. That's awesome.
But the experiment is basically, or the thought experiment is basically, you know, if you were an infinitely powerful being that could imagine or dream anything into existence, you would start with the most ridiculous, over the top fantasy, right? I'm
Mhm.
immortal. I can do anything. I can win all the fights. I can get all the women. I will be the most wealthy.
Yep.
But that would get boring. I mean, if anybody's ever played a video game on God mode, it's cool for about 5 minutes, and you're like, this sucks. I want to go back to introducing some sort of
100%.
challenge.
100%.
So Alan Watts posits the same thing. He says, pretty soon you'd want to introduce some things you can't predict. And
Right.
you'd want to think to yourself, whoa, you'd want to wake up the next morning and think to yourself, whoa, that was a close one. That was a fun dream. Now let's try this. Now let's try this. Now let's try this. So on and so forth into infinity, until you have every possible life, every possible outcome. And
Yep.
at that moment, I remember the first time I heard that talk, I just had this choked up, hairs on my neck, goosebumps feeling of, that I don't want to say that it's higher truth or something, but it feels very much like you've just been hit with something truer than true. And
Mhm.
and 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 by that I mean, I would never be able to prove that empirically. There's no measurements I could ever do that would be able to prove that, but just knowing that his logic is right, just knowing that this makes sense. In the same way like simulation theory makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, in that the thought experiment is, do we have simulations now? Yes. Will they continue to get more advanced? Yes. Will they ever hit a state where we can't distinguish whether they're real or not? Likely. So
Mhm.
if that's likely, how do you know you're not in one now? That's the
Right.
simulation theory hypothesis in a nutshell.
Yep.
And he makes a very compelling case using similar logic that, are you a thinker? Yes. Could there be an all-powerful thinker that is all of consciousness wrapped up into one? Yes.
Mhm.
Well, then how do you
Mhm.
know you're not that thing? It's the same kind of
Yep.
logic.
Yep. Yep.
So that hit me so deeply, man.
I
And
love it.
yeah, yeah,
I love it. And especially, you can actually for people like you and me who have been in, heavily altered states. I know you've done ayahuasca. I've done psilocybin. I've done DMT. When time and space collapse, you actually get a glimpse of that. So I love that, and I love the Alan Watts talk. I don't know the name of it, but where he kind of talks about being in your deathbed and looking back and knowing if you tried, if you did try, if you did express yourself to your full ability, or at least you tried. It didn't even have to have been your full capability, but if you tried to go for that, at least you'll look back and not have regret. The worst thing is for you to sit there on your deathbed and know you didn't try and be full of regret. So,
oh, no doubt, man. No doubt. That's one of my biggest fears. I mean,
mhm,
I write about that in the opening introduction of what will be my book, this
mhm,
idea that one of the primary lessons that or takeaways is that this idea that we, and I kind of alluded to this earlier with this idea that I think we're secretly afraid of who we'd be if we succeeded because of what we'd have to go through to get there.
mhm,
But I think that to get to that spot you're talking about on your deathbed with a sort of like, maybe you'll be writhing in pain, like, "Oh," but you'll have some sort of internal smirk
mhm,
where I did that shit. I
right,
did that shit. And what that means is you experienced the highest highs because you experienced the lowest lows. And
mhm,
there is none without the other. I really
right,
believe that. I mean, you brought up ayahuasca, and for me, every session was so brutal, and some of them had no payoff. But when I went through a brutal night 1 and a brutal night 2 with a glimpse of something transcendent, and then a brutal night 3 with full-blown transcendence at the end,
mhm,
you you never knew what that transcendence really was, even if you felt it before, because you didn't just directly feel rock bottom,
right,
and if you can live your life like that, where, and I'm not saying fearlessly, I'm not saying with no doubt, because I think all of that is bullshit. I think fear and doubt are fundamental spices in the recipe of life.
mhm,
You use all of it. You swallow the fear, you swallow the doubt, take the step anyway, and then if you hit the rocks, good job, man. You just hit the fucking rocks. That means now you get to go up.
mhm,
It's, in a way,
mhm,
it's the best thing that can happen to you. And
yep,
I think that's what we all secretly crave, man, is not a life of just success, but a life of really not knowing what's around the next corner, not knowing if going into that dark forest is going to put us right in the lion's den, and doing it anyway, and then coming out of it and going, whew, you know? And if you
mhm.
don't get that experience, I don't think you got the experience of life. I don't think you participated in the divine play.
Absolutely. That really reminds me of the philosophy explored in Fight Club, the movie,
Yeah.
hitting rock bottom, losing everything so that you're free to do anything. I love that because it's so true. It's so true. I feel like, to go back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier about fast forwarding to being, at the end of the game, at the, like having the character with all the gear and all the loot and all the
Mhm.
gold.
Mhm.
You don't really get to do anything else after that point.
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of, you hear the stories of a lot of the richest people in the world being pretty miserable, which is because they're afraid to lose what they have. Um, so to Fight Club is super relevant there by not letting your possessions own you. But
Mhm.
also not trying to get to the end of the story too early because
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
so much life ahead of us. Like it's easy for people to get wrapped up in your age and, oh, well, this guy accomplished this much by this age, so I'm behind now. And
Mhm.
that's totally, I've discovered that everyone has their own path, their own timing.
Mhm.
Uh, there's no one way. Just because it happened for this way, for this guy that way, doesn't mean that it needs to happen that way for everyone. I love looking at some of those heroes that we have today that really didn't even get their kickstart until they were in their 40s or maybe even
Mm-hmm.
50s,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Wim Hof, for example, wonderful guy. I don't know him, but I'm a big fan.
Yeah. Same.
He had a very rough 20s and 30s, you
Yep.
know, and very challenging. And he didn't really get to be at the top of, you know, Mount Olympus the way he is now until he went through the hardest 20s and
Mm-hmm.
30s of his life to be able to transmute that into the beautiful teaching that he brings the world today, you know. So,
100%. Yeah. Yeah. For people who don't know that story, his wife died. He had like 2 or 3 young kids when she died. He became this kind of pariah, black swan type of person in his own family where they thought he was just a weirdo and they didn't believe in anything that he was doing. And then everybody kind of looked at him as this sort of sideshow act. And then slowly over the years, he built up this reputation by
mhm,
continuing down this path of self-exploration and self-mastery. And then he started opening himself up to scientific testing and he started setting world records. And suddenly, yeah, like you said, he's this phenomenon that's like increasing the health and wellness of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And that's a
mhm,
great example because what a great example of someone no one believes in the whole way through until they get to like to some level of perceived success, you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
And it's
And
so
he's
funny.
61, and I think
Yeah.
it's his birthday today,
Oh
actually.
man, that's amazing. What a
Yeah,
great
so happy
birthday to have
birthday,
too.
Wim. Oh, yeah, 420. You know, it's
Yeah.
my grandma's birthday too.
Oh
That's
man.
really cool.
Yeah.
Couple cool birthdays today. Um, yeah, so that's incredible, and yeah, just to, you know, what we're learning is, you know, trust yourself, trust your path, go into those things that you fear, that you want to do, but you're afraid to do. Step into them just a little
Mhm.
bit,
Mhm.
just a little bit. Like your brain is it's been hardwired to give you rewards when you do a thing that's hard. So,
That's right.
you
That's
know,
right.
do that thing, see how good you feel, do it again, get better. You know, it might take you 5 years, it might take you 20 years. It doesn't really matter if you're enjoying the ride, and enjoying the ride and being fulfilled is the goal of life. Happiness is the goal of life, not money. Like you could have $1 million in your bank account. If you feel like shit, that $1 million isn't worth anything.
That's
You know
right.
what I mean? You can't buy you happiness. So,
Yeah, yeah, and I don't wanna start down a whole new trail here, but just to expand upon this idea that your physiology can be programmed to and it does neurologically and physiologically reward you for getting through difficulty. You know, there's this whole
mhm,
notion of what's called hormesis, and it's when you give yourself an acute stress like the cold or like sitting in a sauna and it
yep,
feels like shit and it's really really hard and you start getting a flood of all of these neurochemicals that make you feel really bad and you know cold shock proteins, heat shock proteins, um, and then you stop and you get this tremendous flood of invigoration. I did it. And if anybody's ever done an ice bath or gone to a cryo chamber, they know what I'm talking about.
mhm,
And what's amazing is you can reprogram your body to actually begin to enjoy that stress. And you're not even detracting from that benefit I mentioned. It's not like the benefit goes away. You still get the benefit, and you can be in this state of almost just like beautiful exuberance while sitting in that ice bath, as hard as to imagine as that is. And
mhm,
that is so, I mean, that's a clue right there. That is a
yep,
clue about how if you alter your mind, you literally alter the neural pathways around an experience. Like your
mhm,
limbic system literally rewires. Like it goes from interpreting this as this is bad, this is painful, this is something I don't like to, ooh, I know what this is. I know what this is the
yep,
challenge. This is the fun. This is the game. And you can do
mhm,
that with anything in your life. You can do that with anything in your life if you're willing, if you're courageous enough to do it.
yep. And you even start to look forward to those challenges. Isn't
Mhm.
that funny?
Mhm.
You know, like, because I'm a big sauna user. I love the sauna. In fact, one of the biggest kind of upsets I have about this coronavirus and quarantine is that I'm not able to go to my sauna anymore, and it's been quite a while. I'm really itching to get back. But what's funny is the first time I got in there, I was thinking, of course, these people are crazy. Why would anyone do this? This is so hard. I might pass out. Am I going to die?
Yeah.
And then, 3 times later of trying it, I'm hooked. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to go again. Because when you step out, you feel so incredible. It's like a Zen state, a flow state. I just remember, like finally when I got the first time I did it, I don't think I stayed in long enough for me to like start to break myself down so that I could kind of get that big endorphin push when you get out. But when I did, finally, maybe the third time, and I stepped out after, let's say 15 minutes, which in the sauna is a while. At this point, I'm able to do 40 minutes an hour because I love it so much. But when I first started, it was so difficult, and I finally pressed past 6-7 minutes and got to 15, and then stepped out of the gym. The birds are chirping, the wind's blowing, the clouds are out. I'm just like, oh wow, this is why people love this. It's when they get out, and then I've learned to even love being in after a few more times. I've done it, and then by now I've probably done it 200, 500 times. You know what I mean? So it's amazing. And then the last thing I wanted to say about what we're talking about is Robert Anton Wilson's peptides. They're this endorphin rush, this dopamine rush you get when you're doing something you love. I think we talked about this on my podcast on your show a long time ago. And I said, I can't relate enough to Robert's experience of writing to my experience of building Time Wheel, of building the label, of building the content. That the first few nights that I created the website of Time Wheel, I was up till like 4 every night. And that's, for me, super unusual because I'm an early bird. I get up early, I go to bed early. But I was like riding this like feeling of I'm doing something, I'm transmuting something, like I'm loving what I'm doing, that time just fell away. And I would look at the clock and it'd be 2:00 a.m. and I'd be like, oh wow, getting late. Well, let me just finish this. And then it'd look back 4:00 a.m. Whoa, like what happened? Like if you ever find yourself in those kind of flow states, you're probably doing something that you love. You know what I mean? So that's super cool. Look up peptides if you're not familiar with peptides and you're trying to get into a creative project that and you're afraid to take those steps. Just this is just some reassurance that people have been there before. They've gotten through those entry level stages of anxiety and fear, and just keep going.
That's right, man. That's right. And I love Robert Anton Wilson, and I'm actually not familiar with that talk, so I'm gonna have to dive right into that after this.
Hell yeah. Enjoy it, man. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was super awesome. I feel like it was a bit different, and I think that's cool. It's like a background story.
Yeah, that's what it is, man. And it's also you and me are both changing. I think you're a very different person than you were the first time you were on Third Eye Drops. I know I'm a different person, and I'm starting to get a new set of concerns in terms of I want everything I talk about to be actionable. The very beginning of this conversation, I said you got to figure out how to verb those existential wriggles you have. Yeah. And that's what I really want to put out there. That's the way I want to get people thinking, because it's so easy to get caught up in reading books and, well, this person said this and this, there's a great quote, and great, awesome. But that better be a catalyst for you to go do some shit. That and that's what I want to try to get across. And that's really become a huge part of what I want to put out there.
Well, dude, thank you so much for your time. It's an absolute pleasure, always is, and I look forward to the future. Where can people find what you're up to?
ThirdEyeDrops.com is probably the best way. Most of my socials are some variation of Third Eye Drops. On Insta, it's Third Eye Drops with underscores in between. I think on Twitter, it's just at Third Eye Drops. Facebook, /Third Eye Drops. And I do have a Patreon. I guess I'll mention the Patreon. I do put out a lot of patron-only content, podcasts, other awards, and that's patreon.com/Third Eye Drops.
Amazing.